The last stand, the siege begins, Director Zenth pressed his four-fingered hand against the cold observation window of the colony's command center. The view outside should have shown the peaceful glow of Zara 7's twin suns reflecting off the white buildings of New Haven Colony. Instead, massive black shapes blotted out the sky. Kethvar dreadnoughts hung in orbit like predatory insects, their weapon ports glowing with deadly energy. "Status report," Zenth commanded, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. The Altarian director had served in the Federation military before retiring to run this mining operation. He understood warfare, which made their situation even more terrifying. Communications Officer Dara looked up from her console, her blue skin pale with worry. "Orbital defense platforms 1 through 6 are destroyed, sir. The transport ships attempting evacuation were vaporized before they cleared the atmosphere. We're completely cut off." Chief Engineer Molex rumbled from his position near the tactical display. The massive Kron's thick hide was designed to withstand extreme temperatures, but even he seemed shaken. "Shield generators are operating at maximum capacity, but they won't hold against sustained bombardment. Maybe 8 hours if we're lucky." Zenth closed his eyes. 15,000 civilians lived in New Haven Colony. Families who had come here to work in the dilithium mines, hoping to build better lives for their children. Scientists studying the unique crystalline formations that made faster-than-light travel possible. Teachers, doctors, engineers, all innocent people who deserved protection. The Kethvar Empire had arrived 3 days ago with a simple demand: surrender the colony and all its resources, or face complete annihilation. Their timing was perfect. The Federation fleet was responding to a crisis in the Vega sector, leaving the outer colonies defenseless. Help wouldn't arrive for weeks, if at all. Through the communication system, Admiral Thexel's voice echoed with cold authority. The Kethvar commander spoke in perfect Galactic standard, his words dripping with contempt. "Director Zenth, you have 1 hour to lower your shields and surrender. Resist further, and we will demonstrate why the Kethvar Empire rules 100 star systems." Underground resistance deep beneath the colony's surface, Chief Miner Corvin examined the improvised weapons his crew had assembled. The Drawn was built for hard labor, thick muscles, reinforced bones, and hands that could grip mining tools for 16 hours without rest. Now those same hands held a plasma cutter modified to fire in controlled bursts. "It's not pretty," he told the group of miners gathered around him in the main tunnel, "but these cutters can punch through Kethvar armor if you hit them right. Magnetic clamps can trap their vehicles. Industrial explosives will bring down their dropships if we time it perfectly." Yara, a young Cillian engineer, raised her hand. "What about the heavy drilling equipment, the Bohr-class miners?" Corvin's eyes lit up. "Those machines can drill through solid rock. Imagine what they'll do to enemy armor." He gestured to the tunnels around them. "We know every passage, every cave, every hidden chamber in this mountain. The Kethvar are surface fighters. Down here we have the advantage." Dr. Elena Vasquez moved between the wounded, her medical scanner beeping softly as she treated plasma, burns, and concussion injuries. The human doctor had been on Zara 7 for 2 years, studying the unique healing properties of the local crystal formations. She was the only human in the colony, but the other species had accepted her completely. Her small hands worked with practiced efficiency, applying biogel to burns and setting broken bones. "Doctor?" Corvin approached her. "How many can still fight?" Elena looked up, exhaustion clear in her brown eyes. "Maybe 300 who are combat ready. The rest are too young, too old, or too injured." She paused, then added quietly, "We're buying time for nothing, aren't we? Even if we hold them off, more ships will come." The Drawn miner's expression hardened. "Maybe. But my father always said that you fight when fighting is right, not when winning is guaranteed. These people trusted us to protect them. That trust means something." The first wave Kethvar assault shuttles descended like black rain, their hulls gleaming with energy shields. Each shuttle carried 30 soldiers equipped with military-grade weapons and armor. Against them, the colonists had mining equipment and desperate courage. It should have been a massacre. Security Chief Tolan coordinated the defense from the Surface Command Post. The veteran Corgan had fought in 3 border wars before taking this quiet job. His tactical display showed enemy units landing at 6 different points around the colony perimeter. Teams Alpha and Beta, hit the landing zone near the water treatment facility, he ordered into his comm unit. Use the industrial lifters as mobile cover. Team Gamma, those plasma cutters are your primary weapons. Get close and cut through. They're armor joints. The first engagement erupted near the colony's main entrance. Kethvar soldiers advanced in perfect formation, their energy rifles crackling with deadly power. They expected to face security forces with standard weapons. Instead, they encountered something they'd never seen before. A massive mining vehicle rolled toward their position, a 100-ton excavator with rotating drill arms. The operator, a fearless Zephyrian named Kex, had welded metal plates over the cab windows and rigged the drilling arms to spin at maximum speed. When the Kethvar soldiers fired their rifles, the energy bolts scattered harmlessly off the reinforced hull. The excavator plowed into their formation like an unstoppable juggernaut. Drill arms spinning at 3,000 RPM caught Kethvar soldiers and flung them aside like toys. The survivors scrambled for cover, their perfect military tactics useless against an opponent who fought with the tools of industry. At Landing Zone 3, Chief Miner Corvin led a team armed with plasma cutters and magnetic grapples. They struck fast and hard, using the mining tunnels to appear behind enemy lines. Plasma cutters designed to slice through solid rock made short work of Kethvar armor. Magnetic grapples meant for moving heavy equipment yanked weapons from enemy hands. These aren't soldiers, one Kethvar warrior radioed to his command ship. They're using construction equipment as weapons. Our tactical programs have no response to this. The ultimatum commander Vextar stood on the bridge of his assault cruiser, studying the battle reports with growing irritation. The invasion should have been complete within 2 hours. Instead, his ground forces were bogged down in running battles with civilian miners using industrial equipment. Commander, his tactical officer reported, we've taken significant casualties. The colonists are using the mining tunnels to strike at multiple points simultaneously. Our soldiers can't predict their movements. Vextar's 4 eyes glowed with anger. The Kethvar officer had conquered 17 worlds for the Empire. He had never been held up by civilians before. Prepare orbital bombardment. Target the surface structures. If they want to hide underground like worms, we'll collapse their tunnels. Sir, there are still thousands of civilians in those structures. The Emperor's orders were to capture the colony intact if possible. The Emperor wants results, Vextar snapped. Dead civilians can't mine dilithium, but neither can rebellious ones. Sometimes examples must be made. In the colony command center, Director Zenth received the ultimatum with grim resignation. The Kethvar were losing patience. Soon, heavy orbital guns would reduce New Haven to rubble. The underground shelters might protect some civilians, but thousands would die in the bombardment. Sir, Communications Officer Dara called out, her voice filled with sudden excitement. I'm detecting a transmission on the emergency frequency. It's very weak, but it's definitely artificial. Zenth hurried to her station. Federation forces? Unknown, sir. The signal is too degraded to make out clearly, but it's coming from deep space, beyond the outer system. She worked at her controls, trying to clean up the transmission. Through the static came a voice speaking accented Galactic standard. This is Captain Chen of the Terran vessel Indomitable. Received your distress signal, en route to your position. Hold the line, help is coming. The bridge fell silent. Zenth felt something he hadn't experienced in days. Hope. Terran? Human? Dara nodded, her eyes wide. Yes, sir. But, sir, there's only one ship. How can one ship fight an entire fleet? Desperate hours, the next 6 hours tested every person in New Haven Colony. Kethvar forces pressed their attack with increasing brutality, using heavy weapons to blast through civilian defenses. The colonists fought back with everything they had, turning every tool into a weapon and every building into a fortress. In the residential district, families huddled in underground shelters while the battle raged above. Children cried softly, While their parents whispered reassurances, they didn't believe themselves. The sound of explosions shook dust from the tunnel ceilings, and emergency lights cast eerie shadows on worried faces. Dr. Elena Vasquez worked frantically in her makeshift medical center, treating an endless stream of wounded defenders. Her supplies were running low, but she refused to give up. "We need more biogel and bone regenerators," she told her assistant, a young Altarian named Finn. "Doctor, the supply depot was hit by orbital fire," Finn replied sadly. "Most of our medical equipment is destroyed." Elena closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them with renewed determination. "Then we use what we have, sterilize everything we can find, tear up clean clothing for bandages. We'll save every person we can with whatever tools remain." On the surface, Chief Miner Corvin's teams continued their guerrilla campaign. They had discovered that Kethvar soldiers relied heavily on their advanced targeting systems and coordinated tactics. When faced with chaotic, unpredictable attacks using unfamiliar weapons, the invaders struggled to respond effectively. "Strike Team 5, report." Corvin spoke into his comm unit while crouched in a maintenance tunnel. "We've disabled 2 of their hover tanks with magnetic mines," came the reply. "The industrial grapplers work perfectly for yanking off armor plates. These Kethvar have never fought miners before." "Good. Remember, we're not trying to win this war. We're buying time for that human ship to arrive." Corvin paused, doubt creeping into his voice. "Assuming it can actually help us." In orbit, Commander Vextar prepared for the final assault. His patience was exhausted. "Charge the heavy plasma cannons. We'll turn this entire mountain into molten slag. Any colonists who survive can explain to the Emperor why they chose death over surrender." The massive guns of the Kethvar dreadnoughts began to glow with deadly energy. Soon they would unleash firepower capable of cracking planetary crusts. New Haven Colony would become a crater, and 15,000 civilians would die for the crime of refusing to submit to tyranny. But in the depths of space beyond the edge of the star system, something moved through the darkness. Something that had traveled further and faster than should have been possible. Something that carried with it the fury of a species that had never learned to abandon their friends. The rescue was coming, and the Kethvar Empire was about to learn why humans were feared across the galaxy. Thunder from the void arrival of the storm. The first sign was a ripple in space itself, like heat waves rising from sun-baked metal. Then reality tore open with a sound that somehow carried through the vacuum. A howling roar that spoke of engines pushed beyond their limits, and a crew that refused to accept the impossible. The TSS Indomitable burst from hyperspace at the edge of the Zara 7 system. Her hull scarred from a dozen battles and her weapons charged for war. She was a Defiant-class battlecruiser, built for speed and firepower rather than elegant lines. 2 kilometers of reinforced titanium and human engineering, painted in the deep blue of the Terran Navy with kill marks etched along her sides like a predator's stripes. On the bridge, Captain Marcus Chen stood before the main display, his weathered face grim as he studied the tactical situation. The 45-year-old officer had served in the Centauri campaign and the Rigel border war. He'd seen civilized species commit unspeakable acts when they thought no one was watching. Today he intended to remind the galaxy why humans had earned their reputation. "Tactical assessment," Chen ordered, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had never lost a ship under his command. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim worked at her station, her fingers dancing over holographic controls. 12 Kethvar vessels in orbit around the planet. 3 dreadnoughts, 6 heavy cruisers, 3 support ships. Combined firepower is approximately 4 times our maximum output. "Engineering, what's our status after that hyperspace jump?" Chen asked. Chief Engineer Kai Nakamura's voice crackled through the comm system from deep in the ship's belly. "Captain, I pushed the fusion reactors to 130% capacity to get us here this fast. We've got full power for maybe 6 hours before mandatory shutdown. After that, we'll be flying on backup systems." Chen nodded grimly. 6 hours to save 15,000 civilians and defeat a fleet that should have required an entire task force to engage. Just another day in the Terran Navy. "Communications, any word from the colony?" Picking up their emergency beacon now, sir, replied Ensign David Park. Colony shields are at 11% and falling. Kethvar ground forces have taken 70% of the surface installations. Orbital bombardment begins in 14 minutes. 14 minutes. Chen felt the familiar calm that came before battle settle over him. Time slowed, priorities crystallized, and the impossible became merely difficult. All hands, this is the captain. We have one job today: save every civilian on that planet. The Kethvar think they can murder innocents while the galaxy looks away. They're about to learn otherwise. Impossible odds. Admiral Thexel received the hyperspace emergence alert with mild interest. His tactical officers were competent professionals who had served the Kethvar Empire for decades. They knew how to assess threats and respond appropriately. Single. Vessel, Admiral, reported his sensor chief. Terran design, battlecruiser configuration. Shall we dispatch a cruiser squadron to deal with it? Thexel's 4 eyes studied the tactical display. Humans were a young species, barely 2 centuries into space travel. Their ships were crude but sometimes unpredictable. Still, 1 ship against 12 was hardly worth his personal attention. Send the 4th Cruiser Division. 3 ships should be sufficient to destroy or capture it. Continue preparations for orbital bombardment. What the Kethvar Admiral didn't understand was that humans approached warfare differently than other species. Most civilized races fought according to established doctrines, using proven tactics and overwhelming firepower to achieve victory. Humans had learned to fight in the chaos of planetary warfare, where survival often depended on creativity, speed, and the willingness to attempt the impossible. The Indomitable accelerated toward the planet at full burn, her engines painting a brilliant trail across the darkness. Captain Chen studied the enemy formation and smiled coldly. The Kethvar ships were arranged in a perfect defensive sphere around the planet, textbook formation for protecting orbital assets. Unfortunately for them, humans rarely read the same. Textbooks, weapons, load all torpedo tubes with hunter killers. Target the nearest cruiser's engine section. Engineering, I need maximum power to forward shields and engines. Sir? Lieutenant Commander Kim looked up from her tactical display. The enemy cruisers are moving to intercept. 3 ships. Combined firepower still exceeds ours by 2 to 1. Then, we'll have to make sure they can't use that firepower effectively, Chen replied. Helm, attack pattern Delta 7, full speed directly at the lead cruiser. The bridge crew exchanged glances. Delta 7 was a ramming attack, a tactic that required getting close enough to the enemy that both ships risked destruction. It was considered a desperation move by most naval academies. Human naval doctrine called it Tuesday. The Indomitable dove toward the approaching Kethvar cruisers like a hawk striking prey. Enemy plasma beams reached out across space, striking the human ship's forward shields with enough energy to power a small city. The shields flashed and sparked but held, advanced human engineering absorbing punishment that would have crippled most vessels. At the last possible second, the Indomitable rolled hard to starboard and unleashed a full torpedo spread at point-blank range. 12 hunter-killer torpedoes, each carrying a shaped nuclear warhead, slammed into the Kethvar cruiser's hull. The enemy ship's shields collapsed under the concentrated assault, and secondary explosions rippled along its length. But Chen wasn't finished. Ramming speed. All power to forward shields. The Indomitable's reinforced prow struck the crippled cruiser amidships with devastating force. 2 kilometers of accelerated mass moving at significant fractions of light speed proved that sometimes the oldest tactics were still the most effective. The Kethvar cruiser broke apart like a child's toy, its reactor core erupting in a miniature star. Human ingenuity. Admiral Thexel stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The human ship had just destroyed one of his cruisers using a ramming attack, a tactic no civilized species had employed for centuries. The Indomitable emerged from the explosion cloud, with her forward hull glowing from the impact but her weapons still functional. How is that vessel still operational? He demanded. Unknown, Admiral. Our weapon struck it multiple times, but the damage appears minimal. Their shield technology is unusual. What the Kethvar couldn't know was that human shield generators were designed by a species that expected to take damage in every engagement. Rather than elegant deflector arrays that distributed energy evenly, human shields used redundant, overlapping fields that could absorb tremendous punishment while protecting critical systems. The Indomitable's next target was a heavy cruiser moving to support its surviving companion. Captain Chen studied the enemy ship's configuration and noticed something interesting. Kethvar vessels carried their shield generators on external pods for easier maintenance. Efficient and logical, but it created an exploitable weakness. Helm, bring us around to bearing 27 Mark IV. Weapons, prepare boarding torpedoes. Sir? Lieutenant Commander Kim looked confused. We're going to board an enemy cruiser? Not exactly, Chen smiled. We're going to deliver a present. The boarding torpedoes were normally used to insert marine assault teams into enemy vessels. Today they carried something different, compact nuclear devices designed to detonate inside enemy ships. It was a tactic that violated several interstellar treaties and horrified most civilized species. The Terran Navy called it aggressive negotiation. The Indomitable closed to extreme close range, her point defense systems destroying incoming enemy fire, while her targeting computers locked onto the Kethvar cruiser's shield generators. 6 boarding torpedoes launched simultaneously, their armored hulls designed to penetrate ship hulls and deliver their cargo directly to vital systems. The nuclear devices detonated inside the enemy ship's shield generators, creating a cascade failure that left the vessel defenseless. Follow-up torpedo strikes crippled its engines and weapons, leaving it drifting helplessly. But the real surprise came when the Indomitable launched her fighter squadrons. 12 single-seat interceptors burst from the battlecruiser's launch bays, their pilots whooping with battle joy as they dove toward the remaining Kethvar cruiser. The fighters were small, fast, and equipped with weapons that could punch holes in capital ship armor. Squadron leader Rachel Santos led her pilots in a swirling attack that confused the enemy's targeting systems. The Kethvar cruiser's weapons were designed to engage other capital ships, not fighters moving in unpredictable patterns. While the enemy tried to track the buzzing interceptors, the Indomitable closed for the killing blow. Ground assault, while the space battle raged overhead, Commander Vextar prepared to execute his ground assault plan. The human ship was clearly doomed. No single vessel could defeat an entire fleet. Once the space battle ended, he would complete the conquest of Zara 7 and present Admiral Thexel with a functioning dilithium mine. Ground forces, advance on all fronts, he ordered from his command shuttle. Orbital bombardment begins in 6 minutes. I want those tunnels sealed before the civilians can escape deeper underground. What Vextar didn't know was that the Indomitable carried more than just ship-to-ship weapons. In her launch bays, alongside the fighter squadrons, waited 2 companies of Terran Marines. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They were specialists trained for the most dangerous missions in human space. Drop pod assaults, boarding actions, and impossible rescues were their specialty. Sergeant Rachel Torres checked her weapon for the 3rd time as her drop pod prepared for launch. The 30-year-old Marine had served on 6 different worlds, fighting pirates, slavers, and worse. Today's mission was simple: get to the surface, link up with colonial defenders, and hold the line until evacuation was possible. Listen up. Marines, she shouted over the noise of the launch bay. 15,000 civilians are counting on us. The enemy thinks they can massacre innocent people while the galaxy watches. We're going to teach them otherwise. Ora! Ora! 47 Marines replied in unison. The drop pods launched like bullets from the Indomitable's belly, their armored hulls glowing cherry red as they plunged through Zara 7's atmosphere. Each pod carried 2 Marines and enough equipment to fight a small war. As they fell toward the planet's surface, automated systems painted targeting data on their helmet displays. Sergeant Torres felt the familiar combination of terror and exhilaration that came with combat drops. Her pod's retro rockets fired at the last second, cushioning the impact as she slammed into the ground near New Haven Colony's main entrance. The pod's sides blew open, and she rolled out with her rifle ready. The scene that greeted her was chaos. Kethvar soldiers in black armor advanced methodically through the colonial streets while desperate civilians fought back with mining equipment. Plasma beams cut through the air like deadly lightning while improvised explosions shook the ground. Torres keyed her comm unit. All squads, this is Hammer 1. Establish defensive positions and link up with colonial forces. Rules of engagement are weapons-free. Anything in black armor is a target. The Marines spread through the colony like avenging angels, their advanced weapons and training turning the tide of battle. Where Kethvar soldiers had been advancing unopposed, they suddenly faced disciplined fire from concealed positions. Marine snipers picked off enemy officers while assault teams flanked and destroyed Kethvar vehicles. But the real turning point came when the Marines linked up with Chief Minor Corvin's guerrilla teams. The combination of human military doctrine and colonial improvisation created something the Kethvar had never encountered before. Turning the tide, Doctor. Elena Vasquez looked up from treating a wounded miner when armored figures appeared in her makeshift medical center. For a moment she thought they were Kethvar soldiers and reached for the plasma scalpel she'd been using as a weapon. Then she saw the blue and white flags painted on their armor and almost wept with relief. "Terran Marines, ma'am," the squad leader said, removing his helmet to reveal a young face marked with concern. "Corporal Anderson, we're here to get you out." "I'm not leaving my patients," Elena replied firmly. "These people need medical attention." Anderson nodded with respect. "Then we hold this position. Jones, Rodriguez, set up a perimeter. Martinez, help the dock with the wounded." Throughout New Haven Colony, similar scenes played out as human Marines coordinated with colonial defenders. The result was devastating for the Kethvar forces. Their tactical computers had no programming for enemies who combined professional military training with desperate creativity. Chief Minor Corvin found himself working alongside Sergeant Torres, planning attacks that used both marine weapons and mining equipment. "That plasma cutter can punch through their armor," he explained, pointing to a modified industrial tool. "But we need to get close." "Leave that to us," Torres replied. "Marines, suppressing fire on my mark. Chief, take your team around the left flank. When they're distracted, hit them with everything you've got." The attack succeeded beyond their wildest hopes. Kethvar soldiers, trained to fight other professional armies, had no defense against opponents who used construction equipment as weapons. When plasma cutters designed for mining operations were turned against military armor, the results were catastrophic for the invaders. But the real breakthrough came when Engineer Nakamura's voice crackled through the Marine comm network. "This is indomitable engineering to all ground units. We've identified a weakness in Kethvar power armor. The joints are vulnerable to electromagnetic pulses. If you can rig some kind of EMP device." Chief Minor Corvin smiled grimly. "We've got mining charges that use electromagnetic detonators. If we modify the pulse generators..." Within an hour, colonial miners and human Marines had created weapons that turned Kethvar advantages into liabilities. The enemy's advanced armor became useless when electromagnetic pulses disabled their power systems. Weapons designed to overcome, shields couldn't function when their targeting computers crashed repeatedly. Kethvar Retreat Admiral Thexel watched his tactical display with growing horror. The human ship had destroyed 4 of his vessels and crippled 2 more. His ground forces were in full retreat, reporting that the colonists had somehow acquired advanced weapons and professional military support. "Admiral," his communications officer reported nervously, "Commander Vextar is requesting immediate orbital bombardment of the colony. He says the situation on the ground is untenable." Thexel studied the display showing the space battle. The Indomitable was heavily damaged but still fighting, her human crew refusing to surrender despite impossible odds. Her fighter squadrons continued to harass his remaining ships while her main guns fired with mechanical precision. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human vessel." Captain Chen's image appeared on the main screen, his uniform torn and blood seeping from a cut on his forehead. Behind him, the Indomitable's bridge showed signs of battle damage, but the crew remained at their stations. "Admiral Thexel," Chen said calmly, "I'm offering you one chance to withdraw your forces from this system. Leave now, and no more of your people have to die." Thexel's 4 eyes blazed with anger. "You command a single damaged ship against my entire fleet. What makes you think you can dictate terms to the Kethvar Empire?" Chen smiled coldly. Because in about 30 seconds, you're going to receive a priority transmission from your homeworld. I suggest you answer it. Before Thexel could respond, his communications board lit up with an urgent message from the Imperial capital. The transmission showed Grand Admiral Kextel, Supreme Commander of all Kethvar forces, his scaled face dark with fury. Admiral Thexel, you will withdraw from the Zara 7 system immediately. The humans have just destroyed 3 of our frontier bases and are currently bombarding our supply depot at Kepler Station. Their entire battle fleet is moving toward the border. The Emperor has ordered all forces to return to defensive positions immediately. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Thexel stared at Captain Chen's image, understanding, dawning in his alien features. You planned this. The attack on our bases, the moment you decided to murder civilians, Chen replied. You made this personal. Humans don't abandon their friends, Admiral. And we remember our enemies. Victory and respect. 6 hours later, the last Kethvar ship disappeared into hyperspace, leaving the Zara 7 system under human protection. The Indomitable hung in orbit above New Haven Colony, her hull scarred and her engines running on backup power, but her mission complete. In the colony's medical center, Dr. Elena Vasquez worked alongside Marine medics to treat the wounded. The casualty count was heartbreaking, over 300 dead and twice that many injured. But it could have been so much worse. 15,000 civilians were alive because one human ship had refused to let them die alone. Director Zenth found Captain Chen in the colony's main meeting hall, where the human officer was coordinating relief efforts with colonial administrators. The Altarian leader approached hesitantly, still amazed by what he had witnessed. Captain, Zenth said formally, on behalf of the New Haven colony, I want to thank you. Your actions today saved every person on this world. Chen looked up from his tactical display, exhaustion clear in his eyes. No thanks necessary, Director. We heard people calling for help. Humans answer that call. But why? Zenth asked. Your ship was outnumbered 12-1. You had no tactical advantage, no hope of victory by any reasonable calculation. Why risk everything for people you'd never met? Chen was quiet for a moment, considering the question. Finally, he replied, Because that's what humans do. We don't calculate odds when people are in danger. We don't negotiate with murderers who target civilians. And we never, ever abandon our friends. He paused, then added, Today, you became our friends. Chief Miner Corvin approached, his thick arms crossed but his expression respectful. Captain, I fought in 3 wars and 2 mining disputes. I've never seen anything like what your people did today. You turned industrial tools into weapons of war. You taught us to fight like soldiers. Sergeant Torres joined the conversation, her armor still scorched from battle. We didn't teach you anything, Chief. You already knew how to fight for what mattered. We just helped you focus that knowledge. Dr. Elena Vasquez looked up from her medical supplies, pride evident in her voice. Today, the galaxy learned something important. Humans don't abandon their own, and they don't abandon their friends. When people call for help, humans answer. 3 days later, a Federation relief fleet arrived at Zara 7 to find the crisis already resolved. The Indomitable had departed for repairs, but her message echoed across the galaxy. Humans would protect the innocent, no matter the cost. In alien bars and council chambers from the core worlds to the outer rim, the story spread like wildfire. The day one human warship took on an entire Kethvar fleet and won. The day 15,000 civilians lived because humans refused to calculate acceptable losses. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. When humans say, no one gets left behind, they mean it. And when they come howling out of the void with fire and thunder, empires fall and the innocent survive. The Kethvar Empire never attacked another human colony. They had learned, as many others would in the years to come, that humans don't just fight wars. They end them. The end.